This is the Into the Paddock podcast.
We got into this a little bit in our last show, talking about what it was like to be in Speedway, but at that point we had only been at the track for Carb Day, and I know you agreed with me, the atmosphere that there was on Carb Day was something else, like something I hadn't experienced at any other kind of event. Boy, was the race something else entirely. It was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it was, first of all, the facility, like you said, is just top notch. Like on race day, that place popped even more as far as its presentation, how passionate and electric the fans were. Like, it's the single largest spectator event in the world for a single day event, and it's 350,000 people, and through the rain delay, 300,000 people stayed for the race. The stands were still packed 4 hours later. The place was buzzing. The EDM concert started at 7 a.m. with the DJ shouting at the top of his lungs, "Wake the F up, Indy!" And then it just started pumping. Like, that energy just stayed through the entire event. It was magical. Definitely worthy of a bucket list item and a crown jewel of the motorsport calendar.
And that was the thing. You mentioned the rain delay, and you know, we mentioned it in the roadshow episode, that so much of the pre-race, so much of the month of May had been in anticipation of the rain that was expected for race day. And sure enough, it hit. You know, it hit about an hour and a half before the race had been scheduled to start. We had briefly gone up to our seats, and then we all got taken out of the grandstands because of lightning in the area. We were all hunkered down underneath the stands for like 3 hours or something like that before we were allowed to resume our seats. And despite all of the rain, despite the wind, the atmosphere under those stands was incredible. Nobody lost spirit. You know, it was still such a fun environment, you know, especially where we were under the Southwest Vista. You know, you had a beach ball being thrown around at one point over a fence where predictably some guy in an American flag vest jumped over to retrieve it and nearly got thrown out by an official. You know, it was such a good vibe from the moment you walked in through the gates, not even through the gates, I walked up to the tailgating. And as you said, to a chorus of "Let's wake the fuck up, Indy!" Like, just that set the tone. The atmosphere never wavered from that point. And then all the anticipation of the rain and whether or not the race was going to go ahead. And then after all of that, we got treated to the race that we got, which, of all the Indy 500s that I've watched in the last 13 years or so, that was, not just because I was there, it was one of the most exciting races I've seen in a long, long time. It was a little bit messy at the beginning, I'll grant them that, but the conclusion, the final 20 laps or so, you had basically a 4 or 5 car battle for the lead at various points with different contenders coming and going. And then that final lap where we had 2 lead changes and ultimately a second-time winner of the Indy 500 and only the 5th person, I believe, to win consecutively. Let's talk about the winner, Josef Newgarden, who none of us actually mentioned when we were predicting who was going to win the race. I don't know about you as to why you didn't pick Newgarden, but I suppose, you know, so much of Josef Newgarden's preparation for the 500 was tarred with the brush of what happened with the push to pass at St. Petersburg and the disqualification that was announced just before Barber. And, you know, from my point of view, the reason why I hadn't picked him, despite the fact that he qualified on the front row, was given how he performed in the last 2 races at Barber and at the Indy Grand Prix, he seemed incredibly distracted by the whole situation. And this was going to be a race where he was without a lot of his key personnel. So I assumed, wrongly, that Josef wasn't going to be performing at his best and he was still going to be waylaid by this. But clearly he wasn't.
Yeah, I think one thing that we completely forgot about in the wake of this controversy is how dominant Josef Newgarden was at the ovals, or has been at the ovals for the past 2 seasons. Didn't he sweep all the ovals last year for the IndyCar series? He won Texas, he won both Iowa races. Like, he was just completely dominant on that configuration of racetrack. So, you know, it's one of his strong suits. We assumed wrongly, because the road courses he hasn't performed very well on recently, with the exception of St. Pete, even with the push to pass controversy. And we've spoken about at length how feel like his confidence was shaken, that he's just too distracted by this controversy to perform at the top level, and he proved us all wrong. He showed that, hey, I am a champion, not just of the series, but also the Indy 500, now 2 times. So he's the 2-time. So congrats to him. Hats off to him for just making a super clutch move at the end of the race. Like, I'm still flabbergasted at what he did, and in his battle with all the other people. Pato Award. I feel so bad for him. The place just went nuts when Pato made one of his last passes. And then after the race, the crowd let their feelings know to Josef as he was doing his little parade interview around the track in the Corvette. But he took it all in stride. So it was just hats off to him. We were wrong. I'll put my hand up and say it. I admit it. So, yeah, GG to him.
Yeah, it was incredible. And that you could see throughout the race that he had a level of confidence in both himself and his car. In the early stages, whenever he and Scott McLaughlin would get in the pack, they would very quickly get back up to the front. I thought McLaughlin was the strongest of the Penske's for much of the race. Some of the moves he made into turn 1, sending it 3 wide on the inside, 3 wide on the outside, and he always came out on top. But Josef, I think the key thing, and you identified this, was some of the passes he was able to make, particularly in turn 3 come the end of the race. There was a point where he overtook, I believe it was both Santino Ferrucci and Christian Rasmussen in the same corner at turn 3, and a lot of other people were struggling to make moves on the outside there. So Newgarden kind of telegraphed how strong he could be in the late race situation right there, and sure enough, I think Pato Award drove an incredible race. He certainly didn't have the car of Josef Newgarden. You look at the way it was handling throughout the race, that double save he made out of turn 2, you don't see people survive that kind of save. And then, they managed to get it a little bit better, but you watch those final few laps from Pato's onboard, and whilst Newgarden's car looks nailed and strong, Pato is constantly correcting the car and constantly making adjustments. He was really on the edge of what was possible with his race car. So for Pato to be still in the fight on the final lap, I think was an incredible effort, and I thought he was very calculated as well. In the last few years, he's been in contention a couple of times now for the 500, and he's come up short either for being too aggressive or not aggressive enough. I think this time he played it to perfection. He had an opportunity to overtake Josef into turn 3 on the penultimate lap and chose not to take it so that he could make the move into turn 1, which historically the last few years has been the move to make. If you ignore the red flag 1-lap sprint where Marcus Ericsson had no way of defending against Josef Newgarden last year into turn 3. But, in seasons past, every time you pass into turn 1 on the final lap, you've got a very, very good chance of coming home kissing the bricks. This time, Pato, I don't want to say that he drove really, really good. I wouldn't put this as he didn't do anything to lose it. However, I would put the question mark about the weaving coming off of turn 2. I feel like he was maybe a little bit abrupt coming off of turn 2. He didn't go all the way out to the wall and then come down to try and not lose momentum, but I don't know whether that would have necessarily cost him, because the run Josef got out of 2 into 3 was so much that he was more than alongside into turn 3. And then that move by Josef Newgarden to go around the outside there, right at the end of the race on the edge of grip, it was an incredible move. And as Josef went on to say post-race, for Pato to race him cleanly and for them to have both not ended up in the fence. When they both turned in to that corner, I remember watching it on the video board, and I was thinking, third place is going to win this now. But they didn't. They both made it out the other end. Josef managed to win the drag race back to the line and is now a 2-time Indy 500 winner and a consecutive winner. For the first time, I think, since Elio Castroneves did it in 2002 and 2003, I think, or something like that.
2001, 2002.
2001, 2002. Yeah, it was an incredible performance. Just an unbelievable finish. The battle between the two over the last few laps, and also involving the other drivers behind them, Scott Dixon, Alex Rossi, Alex Palou a little bit earlier on. It was just an absolute jousting match between all of them for the last 20 laps, and it was absolutely sensational. And as you kind of hinted at, the crowd, you know, it wasn't a chorus of boos for Josef Newgarden, but there was definitely a favourite in Pato Award. When he took the lead coming onto the final lap, the place erupted. It was incredible. But yeah, Josef, I think, very much kind of had the villain effect for this 500. There definitely was a little bit of anger towards him from a significant enough amount of people for it to be noticeable. I'm sure Josef noticed all the people flipping him the bird on his parade lap. But
yeah. I mean, he pointed right to him like, "Hey, I see you," because the people right next to us were letting him know their opinions, and he's like, "I see you."
Yeah,
giving a nice point. Like you said, Pato drove a perfect race in those final laps, finding a car that wasn't nearly as hooked up as Newgarden's, and like my heart goes out to him. You saw how much it meant to him, but he also lost it in the right way, if that makes sense. I mean, anyone who finishes second in any race would hate to hear that, but it's very much true of how he performed and how much he's matured in the past couple years, because we've seen him throw these races away, and now he's actually making clinical, logical decisions to like, okay, no, I don't have to make the move every time I get a run. I just need to make one move at the right time. So he just got beat. There's nothing else he could possibly do. You had to tip your cap to Newgarden, but
still plenty of racing to go in the IndyCar series, and we will be watching it now with even more renewed vigor after what was probably the best week of my life, especially the Sunday of race day, the best day of my life. I will never ever forget that Indianapolis 500. I will be back at some point, I'm sure, and yeah, I'll have to come back to the Indy 500 someday. Maybe not for a while. I've got some other things planned first, but I will. Yeah, if I never manage to get back to the Indy 500, my life will have been improved massively by having gone just once. So, if you haven't gone to the Indy 500, this is your moment. Go. Just, you won't regret it.
This is the Into the Paddock podcast.